the good things and all the bad things, So it's definitely at this point of the book, once they got to the saint.
What about
the saint chapter?
Gleb, Boris and Gleb.
Yeah, Gleb is really young. Gleb is a kid, and so that's why he gets turned into a saint. But they both get killed by the nephew, and so when they're killed, it's I think Boris doesn't even bring his army with him. He leaves his army and comes open arms, saying, "Let's be friends." And this is, I don't know, is that a very Russian trait? To just leave your arms and open up your arms and say, let's be friends. But that's what he's claiming, is that Boris is, the embodiment of the Russian psyche.
Well, it is. It's like, again, it's a stereotype again.
Yeah.
That people hug each other,
Yeah.
But again, I don't think it's specifically a Russian thing.
No.
Although some people say in Russia.
Right. But then people are going to say the same thing about America or Southerners in America or somebody else. They're going to say the same kind of stuff. It's, I don't know.
That's they pick up kind of regular human traits.
Yeah.
Some kind of compassion.
They were humans. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, humans. And they advertise it as like a peculiar cultural feature.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
So let's go to the last part, myth.
Okay.
So that's what I'm kind of interested in this. So how does he cover this myth of Vladimir? So what is his take on this?
Yeah. It's.
If you read this, I hope you did. So I would like you to kind of address this because it's a very important. It's like instead of conclusion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Instead of a conclusion, he kind of ends with this myth idea. In that he is basically, he calls him, basically an apostle, the Paul of Russia, the binding that all these Russian people, should see as their father, which, and in some ways that's a very nationalistic thing and a very like positive thing, I think, to think about in some ways is like, oh, okay, yeah. But in others, he's not addressing, I think, all the sides of Vladimir, because Vladimir's youth is spent drinking, having sex, and fighting. And even if he doesn't do it as much when he's older, the Christian idea, if you sinned so much, you'll be even more, forgiven. You can even become even better of a saint because he becomes a saint, a couple hundred years after he's died. And it's, why does it take so long for him to become a saint? So the two brothers get turned into saints almost immediately, within his lifetime. After he dies, there in the time they don't turn him into a saint immediately. So maybe it's posterity that is writing him as a saint, because we need a saint to bind all these people together instead of he actually deserves that kind of title.
Right, that's true. That's what right now. That's again critical.
Yeah,
historians, they say that it was, yes, a pure political act, and in kind of post factum, they created this myth about him.
I think there's some truth to it. There can't be none.
No, of course.
But it's like Beowulf. Monks wrote it all down. So and you have 75% of his sources, he says, is from ecclesiastical, and then you have a little bit of Arab sources and Greek and other, but it's nothing. No one writing about him and trying to write like a Greek history that is objective. Even the Greeks were like Thucydides is definitely not objective,
but still more objective than ours.
Right. That's what I mean. And that's what we should any historian should strive to, that kind of ideal, this objective ideal, even when it's your own nation. But I think it's interesting how these Russian city-states can be tied together like they are when they come from very differing cultures, you'd think. Because, I get it, they're all down these different rivers and stuff, and they have some crossover, but there's influences from the outside that are very, very different, from Novgorod to Kiev. Kiev, has huge Greek influences. Their churches look more Greek. You look at Novgorod, and the book has good pictures of this. The Novgorod churches are very wooden, and they look almost Nordic, but not quite. They have that Greek influence too, the Russian influence. And so, it's also farther north, so you can't build with stone as much. So it's interesting to see, his perspective is that it's bound together this early. And I don't know if Russia was really bound together that early. It's kind of like we like to think of the Greeks all together as the Greeks, but they didn't call themselves the Greeks.
It's a wishful thinking, probably, because considering again, it's just my speculation, but considering their ways to communicate plus the lack of centralized states, probably they created this mythology later that, of course, he was a centralizer, but he might have sparked this process, but it was to what extent he was able to control this domain, that's another question, right?
No, it really is. And it's something that like the next generation or next two generations after you have William the Conqueror, and we have evidences of what he did in Normandy, especially, and then also in England to reform the church and to do all these things. We don't have that much evidence to say that Vladimir did all these things, but he's giving him almost all the same achievements as these other figures in history, and I'm afraid that he's being able to using parallelism too much, as this is like all these other guys, because we have the documented evidence, and I get it that there wasn't as much written, but that was one thing that was interesting.
And we would also like to thank Blue Shift, a Memphis-based contemporary chamber music ensemble dedicated to bringing artists and audiences together through artistic collaboration. That's Blue Shift.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, is there anything else I really wanted to talk about?
What would you like to?
I guess, again, the parallel with Paul I thought was interesting. I didn't really talk about that much, but how he says over and over in this one chapter. Well, Paul is the starter in many people's minds of all these the first churches. His dogma is very rigid, and he's very anti-women and all these things, and I don't, if you have a very positive outlook on Paul, I guess comparing him to him is good, but to me comparing someone to Paul is never a good thing. But I'm I'm not pro Orthodox Church in that Vladimir, there's no way that he was that devout of a person. They're just not. You don't go from Viking culture and immediately just switch over, because he keeps up a healthy relationship with the Vikings and uses them as mercenary troops, over and over throughout his reign.
Maybe again, it's my pure speculation, considering what I read. Maybe he was on the way because of his grandmother. He was already kind of, with one foot he was in the Viking world, but with another foot he stood already kind of in the world of this Orthodox Church. Right?
No, I think that's definitely what it is. I think he's extremely smart. He was, however violent and barbarous he was very intelligent, or for his age, very intelligent to be a ruler.
Well, like Charlemagne, the same thing.
Right. And when this happens, he's able to harness religion to his own usage, and he realizes that whether he sees it as only that, or he sees it as he has an epiphany. He actually goes blind when he first sees his wife. And then that's what it is. We didn't talk about that earlier, but he goes blind when he first sees his wife, and then he can't see until he's baptized. And that's a Paul, jab.
Great, good legend.
It's, obviously fabricated, but it really drives home the idea of him being this founder of the Orthodox Church in Russia, in its own foundation, separate from the Byzantine Church. Which is that important to a lot of Russians? But the very fact that it was done this way, it was mythologized in kind of a political leader, a warrior, bringing this church and becoming the first kind of founder of the church. It created this tradition of unification of church and state. As a permanent legacy of Russia, in contrast to Paul. Because Paul was the founder of the church. That's it. But he wasn't Constantine. He was not political leader. He was the church leader with his gospels, traveling, doing missionary activities. He was not a politician, essentially. But Vladimir was both a kind of politician who brings the church.
he was acting like Muhammad, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The first image, Muhammad, that comes to my mind. The same thing, warrior, like trying to force other people, follow my way, you will be you will not survive. Something like this, So much for this kind of...
and I think that's reinforced that you have the Varangian Guard being formed in Constantinople during this time, and they're Vikings coming through and to serve this god king almost, the Byzantine emperor.
So when I compared him with Muhammad, it was not exactly the correct way to do things, because Muhammad did establish the new church.
Yeah.
But here he was bringing the existing church. Mm-hmm. But in this domain, he was acting as a kind of both spiritual and political leader,
Right.
As far as the Russia is concerned. What did you want to say?
No, you're fine. It's how the Norse people react to the Crusades, the ones who are Catholic. The Norse kings are some of the first and only kings to go on crusade, actually. And I think more kings from Denmark, Sweden, and Norway go on crusade than any other Western European nation. And why do they do this? It's this martial tradition that's built into the state, which then when the state and the religion are made one and the martial tradition is there, they have to go on crusade. And you have the Baltic Crusades later on, and you have, Vladimir has to conquer. Like that is his nature, in some ways, even if he is converted, I feel like.
So it's a little bit of digression. So does Volkoff write about it, or are you trying to bring this about crusades?
No. I was just talking. That's outside. Sorry.
No, that's fine, because it's interesting, because I kind of did make a note of this. So you did read that Crusaders, the major bulk of them, were coming from Northern Europe, right?
Right. Oh yeah.
See, I didn't know this. I didn't know this.
Not only Northern Europe, but then even more from I think Scandinavia, which all of Northern Europe is a pretty Scandinavian influence. It was
related to the Viking tradition.
Right. I think Crusades is a complete. You can watch the trajectory of the Norman conquests, which once they're done, and there's all this pent up ferocious energy in Christendom, the Pope has to figure out a way to get it out, to let them release. And because they have England, they have all of Scandinavia, they have parts of northern Germany, Sicily.
It was a lethal energy. It could be turned against him.
Right.
So to channel it
and each other, him and each other, and he saw a way to try to bind Christendom together as a Catholic church, send him against his enemies. Definitely he has his own political motives too. Urban the Second, I think, is who it is. Yeah. Sverrir Jakobsson's, his articles talk a little bit about the crusade part and how that incorporates into this trade.
Can you tell me?
Yeah, a little bit off the top of my head.
I'm curious.
But yeah, it's where he sees somewhat where you have the Varangian Guard as
again. What's his name for the record?
Sverrir Jakobsson. Yeah, and he's a
title of their.
He's a professor at Iceland, University of Iceland, and I'm talking about 2 articles he wrote: "The Schism That Never Was," Old Norse Views on Byzantium and Russia, and "The Varangian Legend: Testimony from Old Norse Sources." And the Varangian Legend one, I think, is more of where this information comes from, is that this martial tradition that is in Byzantium and has been, of sending these people far away, men far away, because in Viking law, exile is a big thing. Unlike Western European law, they don't straight up just kill people immediately. Viking law is strangely pretty lenient, and people don't know that. It's actually, they had very, very sophisticated laws for a very unsophisticated I guess culture, in the sense of like, they didn't have big buildings, they didn't have great technology, but they did have this law system which is actually pretty lenient in some ways. You pay a lot of fines, more fines than anything else, but there's exile things, and so
there was this kind of intentional desire to take human life.
No.
The way
No.
you could pay, right?
Right.
In a